So another week passes and another weekend of drama for Manchester United. A defeat to Crystal Palace on Monday night now means that Man United need 5 points from the next 9 available. 5 points from the last 9 available to them at the end of this league season to avoid picking up the worst ever league tally in the Premier League era. That was obviously a tally that was picked up a few seasons ago by Ralf Rangnick when he was interim head coach. As such, there's so much speculation over Eric Ten Hag's future at the club. The papers and reports across England are reporting that he could get sacked before the FA Cup final, could get sacked after the FA Cup final, could get sacked at the end of the season. It seems they're all more or less agreed that Ten Hag is moving on. As such, we want to kind of spend this video today looking at the potential candidates that could step in for Ten Hag next season at Man United. Of course, also looking at Ten Hag's own record at the club and whether he deserves a little more time. Ewan, let's get started with that. You actually wrote the article that looked into Man United's worst ever Premier League finish in terms of points. I've probably butchered the stats, so feel free to correct me if I have done so. But looking at that, and of course you've been kind of on the Man United beat for us this season, covering them quite extensively. Some fans may be kind of looking at all the speculation, constant reports from inside the club, outside the club that Ten Hag's moving on. A whole list of head coaches have been linked with the job this season. Is an argument to be made that a lot of Man United fans are just trying their best to ignore that, and there's still some kind of hope that, you know, the club could just get to the end of the season, get to the summer, rebuild, and then give Ten Hag a little more time next season?
Yeah, I mean, the speculations have been ongoing since about September, October, which is quite debilitating, obviously, for the manager. He's had to face questions upon it all the time. And I think certainly at that stage of the season it was unfair, because I think Ten Hag's first campaign at Manchester United was a success. You know, third place finish, and he won a trophy their first in 6 seasons. And as you touched on, Stefan, your stats are right, by the way. Absolutely spot on. He took over from a Manchester United side who recorded their lowest ever points total in the Premier League era. Not to talk about other managers, but if you look at Jurgen Klopp and Mikel Arteta, a lot is said about them taking over Arsenal and Liverpool respectively when they were on a downward ebb. But equally so, Ten Hag took charge of Manchester United on a downward ebb. Look at the points totals. And if you compare Ten Hag's record still to those two in their first 2 seasons at Arsenal and Liverpool, it stacks up pretty well. So that's a kind of case for defence, but look, with each passing week it becomes almost impossible to put up too strong a defence that Ten Hag should keep his job. You talked about the points record there. The most goals they've conceded in their Premier League season is 57. They're currently on 55, so it's fair to say that's going to go. The most defeats in the league season has been 13. They're currently on 13. That's probably going to go. They've only scored 3 more goals currently than the least they've ever scored in their Premier League season. So if you look blindly at stats and the league position, and just with your eye on the performances, what's gone this season, it's very, very difficult to make a case for Ten Hag to keep his job. However, I probably would still sway towards giving him another season. I don't want to bang on about injuries because I don't think every club will moan about it, but Manchester United have been really hampered because the majority of those injuries have came in defence. They've been without a left back pretty much all season. Luke Shaw's only made 15 starts. Molasses went all season. They've changed their back four something like, I think it's 34, 35 times. It is quite difficult to build on last season and form a style of play when you have to change your defenders all the time. You can't build partnerships. Look at the best defenders in the league this season in Arsenal. You know, it's always Raya, White, Gabriel, Saliba, and then they sometimes change their left back. They've got that solid structure in there, and that's so important. So I think that's been a huge factor. The other thing as well is Manchester United haven't had a proper footballing structure in place for a decade. So the hope with Ineos coming in this summer and, you know, integrating that, you've obviously got a new CEO in Omar Barada. You've got Dan Ashworth coming in. Jason Wilcox is already at the club. I do think that Ten Hag probably deserves another season with a proper footballing structure in and keep him as far away from recruitment as possible, because his recruitment record has been horrendous. But listen, I'm a fan of Eric Ten Hag. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's shown that at Ajax. Is a reason why Bayern Munich are maybe looking at him as well. But it's difficult because I think if you lose the fan base with performances this season, it becomes difficult to kind of keep your job long term.
Yeah, Ben, it's interesting that Ewan mentions the kind of recruitment aspect of what's going on at Man United this season. And when I do kind of look at what the club have been doing off the pitch over the last kind of 5 or 10 years, I do find myself sympathising with the argument that Ewan's making that, yeah, you could get rid of Ten Hag, you could bring in someone else, but it doesn't feel to me like that's the root cause of the problems. The root cause of the problems is that they're still always going to sign those Varans, they're always going to sign those Casemiros, they're always going to sign those, Di Maria's. I know obviously he did very well once he left Man United, but there's a whole catalogue of expensive signings made with very little due diligence at Man United over the years. Do you think there's an argument to be made that Ten Hag's a victim of that rather than the source of the problems that go on at Man United, or is it just simply a case that he's been unable to get the best out of a squad of players, and at the end of the day, that's his job? He hasn't done it well enough. It's time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think they both need to shoulder the blame. The club has been a mess. There's no doubt about that. And the injury record, which Ewan quite rightly points out, has really hampered them this season. And I think Ten Hag could have been forgiven for achieving less than he did in his first season. But for me, I just don't know what's going on. I think if you compare it to, I'm all for giving a manager a lot of time. You look at Arteta at Arsenal gave him a lot of time, went through a really bad patch. But even during that really bad patch, I'm seeing things happening at United that weren't happening at Arsenal. I think there was signs of progression there. You look at the players, the stuff that's going out on with, for example, Garnacho liking a post on Twitter that's criticising his manager. I never saw that happening at Arsenal. And I mean, Ten Hag, I think he had over a week to prepare that Crystal Palace game. He knew that he had centre-back problems. He knew that the defence wasn't going to be the defence he wanted to pick. And I don't really know what he was doing on the training field going into the game. If they'd lost that game 2-1, I mean, Palace probably had the better team on the day. They put up a fight. There was a clear coaching structure there. I think he could have been forgiven again, but they were taken apart time and time again by Crystal Palace. I think they are going to record their worst ever season. You look at their next 3 games, Arsenal at home, Newcastle at home, Brighton away. With the injury problems they have and what we've just seen from them against Crystal Palace, I mean, I don't think you'd be that surprised if they picked up 0 points from those 3 games. So, I mean, it's more than likely going to be their worst ever season. I just think I think his position is untenable now. I think there's too much going on. I don't think that Man United need a long-term appointment. They need someone they're going to stick with, but I don't think Ten Hag's that man. And I would be surprised if after the FA Cup final there isn't a change this summer for Man United.
Well, let's talk about the people who could replace him. Let's start at the very beginning, or the very top of the list, Ewan. Not only the odds-on favourite by the bookies here in the UK, but probably the most high-profile of the potential candidates. That's, of course, Thomas Tuchel. He's made it very clear that he's leaving Bayern Munich. So Bayern Munich, they've made it also very clear, despite the fact that they're still gunning for the Champions League as we record. He's even actually gone so far as to almost flirt with the idea of return to the Premier League. Obviously this week basically said, it's I don't have the quotes in front of me, but more or less said, he loved his time in England. A return to the Premier League would be something he'd love to do, etc., etc. People obviously kind of reading between the lines there, saying he's kind of batting his eyelids at Man United. What would you make of Thomas Tuchel coming in? He's obviously a head coach with a very big reputation. Chelsea fans still adore him, despite the fact that he ended up the way that he left the club. Bayern Munich fans arguably coming round to him now as they edge closer to the final. But do you think he'd make a good appointment at Man United next season?
The list of candidates to replace Eric Ten Hag is incredibly underwhelming, and that's kind of been one of my arguments throughout the season about keeping Ten Hag next season. But Tuchel's the exception to that. I think he's easily the strongest candidate of all the names mentioned. I think he's got an incredible cup record. His league record isn't as good, Stefan. You probably know a little bit more about that from his time in the Bundesliga, but I just like him as a manager. I think tactically he's very adaptable. He's not kind of rigid to one system. He can change systems from club to club. I think he's got a great personality as well. He's very charismatic. I was watching his interview today where I think he's certainly flirting with the idea of going to Manchester United, because he said, I don't want to talk about it, to the question, then proceeded to talk about it, which is a classic sort of managerial thing to do. It's no secret he's loved his time in England. I think working at one of the biggest clubs in the world will appeal to him massively. I think if Ten Hag goes, then Tuchel should be the next Manchester United manager.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. His league record is something that's almost like a kind of a black mark on his paper or his record as a head coach. I think the only league titles he's actually won were in France and with PSG at Ligue 1. It's worth noting that Bayern Munich's points tally this season isn't terribly bad by any means. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they would have actually won some of their 11 consecutive league titles with this return in the Bundesliga. It's just simply the fact that Leverkusen are outstanding, but that doesn't really mitigate for what happened to Chelsea, obviously, where he did have a decent squad. Ben, you could still make an argument that, whereas Tuchel's maybe not your traditional league campaign manager, he's proving time and time again he's outstanding at preparing teams for almost one-off games in these kind of knockout competitions. He's doing it this season with Bayern. He took PSG to their first Champions League final, also won the Champions League with Chelsea. A very good head coach at Dortmund as well before his reputation or his relationship with the club kind of broke down and became untenable, and he moved on. At this point, surely Man United would take that over anything else, really. If he wants to guide them to cup wins and potential success in Europe, and maybe they're a little subpar in the league, it's still better than nothing, I suppose, isn't it?
I kind of disagree, if I'm honest. I think Tuchel is an amazing coach. I think he's one of the best out there coaches. And in terms of getting short-term success, he's done a great job. I don't think he is what Man United need right now. Man United are so far off it. I think they need a long-term project. Tuchel's average spell as a manager is 2.26 years. He's never stayed at a top club for longer than 2.5 years. The longest he spent was 5 years at Mainz before Dortmund. You talk about like being a cup manager more and so. I mean, is that going to solve things going in and winning another League Cup at Man United if they're same position? Ten Hag won a cup last season. I just think they're so far off. They need a young manager. They need a long-term project, and I don't see Tuchel staying there for a long time. He's known for falling out with owners and stuff. I just there's such a big. Man United aren't in a position where he can come in and just win a trophy. They're not going to be in the Champions League next season. I mean, there's a chance they might not even be in Europe next season. For me, they need a long-term project. They need a manager that's going to come in and lead. Man United aren't going to be successful next season, I don't think. But they could be successful in 3 seasons' time if they look ahead now and bring someone in that they're going to stick with and that's going to develop those players. I'm not sure Tuchel is the right man for that, as much as he is an incredible coach.
Well, let's move on to someone who's maybe a more long-term prospect. Graham Potter is the one who's obviously been another manager who's been really strongly linked to the Man United job. He was obviously at Chelsea, before that Brighton. Ben, I'll actually flip this back to you, actually, since you'd obviously already spoke quite a lot about Tuchel. How do we look back on Potter's time at Chelsea? Do we think that should be the extent of his reputation in English football right now? Or do you think a club like Man United going in for Potter could actually be a bit of a crude move, or a shrewd move rather, in the sense that, he's got so much more to offer than he had at Stamford Bridge, and he could actually be that long-term appointee that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I thought at the time, Potter probably shouldn't have taken that Chelsea job, to be honest. I think normally, I mean, this might be an exception if Potter does get appointed as Man United manager, but normally you don't really get 2 shots at a so-called Big Six club in the Premier League, because your reputation is so harmed if you fail there, like Potter's has been, because, he did wilt and it didn't go well. But again, he was brought in, we heard all the speeches from Todd Bowley, like, we're going to give him time, and then 6 months later, sacked. No, but we knew that was going to happen. And at Chelsea, you don't get time, you don't get that. It is worrying how he didn't. I don't even know if he's got enough of the CV to take a massive job like that. But then Arteta didn't have a CV when he went to Arsenal, and he done really well. I don't think Potter would be the right appointment, but I do think his reputation is slightly unfairly damaged at Chelsea. And I think he's a good young coach, but I don't think he's the right man for Man United.
What do you think, Ewan? Do you think Potter could be a smart move, or is he one of the underwhelming candidates that you were mentioning a moment ago?
Yeah, he's near the top of the list of the underwhelming candidates. I don't think you can fall upwards in football management, and fail at Chelsea, albeit in extenuating circumstances and the kind of circus that's going there at the moment. But the pressure at Manchester United is probably 10 times that of at Chelsea in terms of the media focus and things like that. And I think that's an area where Potter struggled. I just don't think he deserves a Manchester United job based off performance at his previous club. I think he's a very good coach. There's no disputing that. But I think when he comes back into management, he'll probably have to be a tier down from a club at Chelsea in the Premier League before he gets that chance to go to a bigger club again.
Yeah, well, another kind of left field option, and this is one that we can choose to take seriously or poke some fun at, is Gareth Southgate. Obviously, the current England head coach going into the really important European Championships, constant speculation over his future at England. I'll go back to you in this one because it feels like a very lazy rumour, but if I'm not mistaken, there are some kind of relationship situations between Southgate and the new, I don't want to call them owners because they're only part owners, but the people that are running Man United. Could you shed a bit of light on that and maybe suggest or to explain to us maybe if it is an actual legitimate option for Man United if Southgate was to leave England this summer?
So like Potter, Southgate has admirers and Ineos, that's well documented. But I think the closest link is to Dan Ashworth. They worked together at England, and I think he's a huge admirer of Gareth Southgate, so that's where that kind of stems from. I know Ashworth's not started his role at Manchester United yet because there needs to be an agreement with Newcastle. He's also on gardening leave there, but I think in the football world there might be a couple of conversations. It's still a couple of text messages still going back and forth there. But in terms of Southgate, it's a one-word answer is no.
Okay, fair enough. Ben, you are the resident Englishman on this video, so don't feel obliged to stick up for Southgate here, but you could make an argument that what he's done extremely well at England is he's built up a very important unit of players who all trust him, who all get on very well. Squad harmony in the England team is miles better than it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's international football, and I know club football was a different thing. But at the end of the day, Southgate has shown that he's been able to take a squad of top class players, get him to believe in what he's doing, respect his coaching, respect his style, and they all play well for him. You can argue about his record at England if you want, but they got to a final. These players are playing well for him. The jury's maybe still out on him in terms of as a tactician, but fundamentally, he's done a good job at England, and that's kind of what you would want as a Man United manager, someone that can bring in good players and get them to play for him.
I think you're right. He's done a really good job at England. I think his penalty shootout away from winning the first major tournament since 1966. But I don't think I've ever seen a man more suited to international management. Tactics and coaching is so much more important in club football. You're working with the players on the training pitch every week. These international managers, they only get their players for a couple of weeks before the tournament and a few international breaks throughout the season. So, and the one question mark over Southgate as an England manager has constantly been his coaching and his tactics, his in-game management. So why would you then appoint him as a Manchester United manager? I think it'd be an absolute crazy appointment. Simon Jordan on TalkSport said choosing between Ten Hag and Southgate is like choosing what disease you'd prefer to have. And I don't often agree with him, but I tend to agree with him on that. I just think Southgate would be a crazy appointment. I think he's so suited to international football. Like you say, the squad harmony, he's made players want to play for England again. And I think that's probably his biggest achievement as England manager. But I just don't think that's as important at club football. Club football is so much more about intricate coaching. I mean, look at the best teams in England right now. Man City and Arsenal are intricately coached so well. Liverpool as well, under Klopp for the last few years. Southgate's nowhere near that tactically for me. And yeah, I know he's got some friends at Man United, but yeah, would be a crazy appointment in my opinion.
Fair enough. Well, the last candidate on our list today is Kieran McKenna, the Ipswich Town head coach. Really getting so much praise and attention right now for back-to-back promotions. A head coach we're going to see in the Premier League. Head coach who may be destined for bigger things. And, of course, a head coach who used to be on the books at Manchester United as a coach. Ben, of all the candidates we've talked about today, is he perhaps the most exciting one? Is he the most invigorating one? Is he the kind of one that would actually get Man United fans excited for next season?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I know it's a massive jump. Obviously, he's only managed in League One and the Championship so far, and this is Manchester United. Like Ewan mentioned, the amount of pressure that comes with that job. But I don't hate it. I don't hate the shout at all. I think he's a young manager. His coaching has been superb. I've watched quite a bit of Ipswich, and what he gets the ball down. He plays really good football. The CV speaks for itself in the lower leagues, back-to-back promotion. He's 37 years old. He absolutely loves Manchester United as a football club. He grew up as a fan. He actually left his role coaching at Tottenham to join Man United as a coach because of how much he loved that club, despite the loyalty Tottenham has shown him. I think he's this type of character that Manchester United need. But if they're appointing him, you have to go all in. You have to have the courage of your convictions and back him and say that you're going to give him loads of time. It's not going to be successful next season. It's going to be a project. It's going to be a process. But out of all the candidates, I mean, I think it could be a good appointment.
Yeah, Ewan, we mentioned there that it seems inevitable that he'd be linked with big jobs and could even move on to bigger clubs if obviously what happens next season. I know there's the kind of argument that he's not coached in the Premier League before, but Pep Guardiola had to start somewhere at Barcelona, came through the youth academy. Mikel Arteta is doing something similar at Arsenal after obviously spending a coaching spell at Man City. McKenna, has actually been a head coach in 2 very competitive leagues and kind of earned his stripes there. I know there's an argument to be made that the step up to Man United is too big, but you make the argument that Arteta made that step to Arsenal, Pep Guardiola made that step to Barcelona. You know, you have to start somewhere, I guess, the argument I'm making. And should Man United not go in for him now before he makes an even bigger name for himself next season and another club comes in for him?
Yeah, I should think he'll stay at Ipswich next season because they got promoted. I think if they'd stayed in the Championship, he might have moved, but I think he'll want to have another crack with Ipswich in the top flight. I think they've got a little bit of money to spend as well now that they're actually in the top flight and they can spend a little bit more. But apart from Tuchel, I think McKenna's the best option out of the other names we've talked about today. He's an incredible coach. I mean, what he's done at Ipswich is phenomenal. The points tallies, the goals they scored, the style of football, also the money they spent. They've not spent a lot of money at all compared to other clubs. It's so difficult for a club who aren't benefiting from parachute payments to go up from the Championship. And McKenna's managed that, and he's got the best out of players, you know, not just younger players, but, you know, aging players. He's taken to another level. Look at Sam Morsey, their captain, for example. I think he's an incredible coach. The interesting thing about this is that when McKenna was coach at Manchester United, firstly under Jose Mourinho, but, you know, more importantly under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, a lot of Manchester United fans at the time questioned his coaching capabilities, which was crazy, mental at the time. Firstly, because you don't have any idea what he's doing in the training pitch, and secondly, if Jose Mourinho thinks you're a good coach, that's probably a good indicator that you're a good coach. And if you look at Manchester United under that time, under Solskjaer, you know, the way they played football, there's a lot of criticism for it in terms of the kind of counter-attacking style, and which is actually quite similar to Ten Hag. But, you know, United had some big results in those days. You know, Solskjaer's record against Pep Guardiola, for example, was pretty good. I think McKenna and Michael Carrick were a huge part of that. It's a huge jump going from Ipswich to Manchester United. But McKenna's been there before. He knows what the club's about. He's been in the corridors. You know, he knows staff. Like, simple little things like that, I think, are important. And you mentioned Guardiola and Arteta, and they both went to clubs where they'd already been before as well, and the new people there. I think McKenna is potentially a future Manchester United manager. I think the question will be, is it too early for him to go now? Could it be a case, if I was defending to keep Ten Hag, could you keep him for another season, see how it goes, see how McKenna does in the top flight with Ipswich, and then look at it? But ultimately, I do think that Manchester United will make a change in the summer. But does that come, you know, a season or two too early for Kieran McKenna? But I think he's a fascinating candidate.
Yeah, all very interesting. Well, you guys can let us know what you think. We've obviously went through a whole list of candidates there. Do you think it could be McKenna, Tuchel, Potter, perhaps even Southgate? Or do you think Ten Hag should be given more time and should be staying at the club next season? Either way, let us know who you think should be the future Man United manager this summer. You can leave the comments below. Like the video if you enjoy what we do. Subscribe to the channel if you can. And until next time, we'll speak to you soon.